another episode in my Being series. My name is Rod Graham, and what I like to do at the beginning of every episode is explain what this is all about, why I'm doing it, and then I'll ask the guest to talk about himself a little bit. So it's called Being because what I want to do is learn about how an interesting person, in this case, Charles Mousseau, came to be, his background, right? I want to know that because he has interesting opinions. So I want to understand how he came to be and then talk about his opinions. I've entitled this Of Math and Men because we're going to be talking about men's issues. But Charles, when he replies sometimes, he's using ideas that I don't expect, and it seems to be that he thinks as a mathematician. I could be wrong about that, and you'll tell me what's going on here. But yeah, Charles is really interesting, and I'm glad to talk to him. He has some interesting ideas. So here we are, Charles. So thanks for coming on.
Well, hey, thanks for having me, Rod. First, as a wonderful introduction, like I said, the word interesting is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, but
Uh,
that's very kind to say. You're right in that because of my background, which I'll get into, I do tend to look at issues and try and think about things in at least a logical sense, or like in a like in a formal sense. I think it was you that I had the chat with. You were talking about affirmative action. I started mentioning something about set theory and such,
mhm.
just to give you an example. But yeah, my background, um, computer, I got a computer science degree in 1997, 9/10 of a pure math minor. Didn't stick around long enough to finish it. Went on, I worked with the Calgary Police as a civilian in the IT department for about 6.5 years, which was great because when I was at parties, I could say, "Oh yes, ladies, I'm a police scientist," and hoping they'd imagine someone like on CSI Boise or whatever who's working with the cops and they're magnifying issues, looking over it. When in fact, all I'm doing is working with someone in the homicide department to design them a new database.
Uh-huh.
Sergeant, would you like this in cornflower blue or sky blue? Stuff like that. But I would then go on about 2007 on now. I've been doing math analysis in the casino industry. I'm currently in a long-term engagement with a major online casino. We developing new games, new ideas, and it's kind of a balancing act because, as you would imagine, if somebody would go to a casino and they never win, no one's going to play at all, right?
Mhm, mhm.
So you have to ensure in your design that the game has a long term edge for the house, but the players win often enough and have a fair enough chance of actually finishing up on the night that it keeps them engaged and it keeps them wanting to play. So, just so for what I do is I take these things that are card games or dice games that most people would look at as fun, and I'm thinking of them strictly in a heavily mathematical sense. And I guess that ultimately influences how I argue. I like talking in concepts like that. Um, Linguistically, you've probably noticed I'm a fan of words having specific meanings. Doesn't mean I'm anti nuance, but I like to have a clear definition. So when I tell people I consider myself a fiscal conservative overall. Most people hear that and they just think of like some millionaire Republican who's trying to pretend he's not. But to me, it's just a very specific idea, and it means like concretely, I believe people deserve equal rights, equal respect, and equal treatment in the eyes of the law and society. Plus, I think the free market outperforms the central economy. And when I tell people that, they'll be like, "Oh no, no, Charles, that's not the case. Capitalism is a failure, etc." I'm like, "Good, we can discuss that. But the point is that like, this is a solid definition, and I think Twitter would be about 99% less toxic if people argued like that um,
Hmm.
in that way. So,
That's not how politics works, though. You can't,
oh,
you can't, you can't, you have to frame things in ways that benefit you. You have to look at things in ways that, I mean, people don't want that kind of precision because it
Yeah.
might not work in their favor. So
Well, exactly.
yeah.
It's
But wait, wait,
yeah.
wait. Before you go on, I want to go back to something because this is new to me. I didn't know this. So I know that the house always wins. I don't gamble. I've been to a casino like twice. And I know that the house always wins, but I thought it was simply because of just the fact that all right, if you're playing a card game, then by design, the probability is such that you're going to lose more than you win. It's like betting. But you're saying
Yeah.
that you can design a game and tweak it to change the probabilities.
Well, by having the just by how you design the rules. Let's say if you have the player, if they achieve a certain hand, they get paid at a certain rate. You can change you alter what hands they get paid on, or you alter how much they get paid, and you try and balance it so that in general, they everybody that puts for every dollar you put in, you'll get about 99 cents back, 98 and a half to 99. And then, yeah, you do. So you did actually have it right. Basically, it is the way the laws of probability work is that the house does have an inherent mathematical edge. And all they do is rely on volume because just as the number of hands gets played, the variance in the casino result just shrinks over time and it gets closer to that average. So basically, you don't need to cheat. People like to think, especially online casinos are rigged. Online casinos cheat. That you talk about killing the goose that laid the golden egg. If you did that, here you have an inherent mathematical advantage, and you're doing something on an internet where your labor costs are minimal, and the amount of hands you can get in an hour is through the roof. Like why would you cheat when you have it that good?
Right. Interesting.
So if I'm doing my job right, they house
okay.
that.
So this conversation is going in a different direction, but we'll get it back to the men's issues. But I got one more question about the casino thing. So I've seen movies and whatnot where there's this really smart card player, and he's counting cards or she's counting cards, and consistently winning, but following the rules, but winning. They're just good at the game, and then they get kicked out. That doesn't seem fair to me.
I would first of all, you're correct. Yes, even today at blackjack, there are minimal opportunities where it's not illegal. Even in Nevada, where the casinos are so far in the judge's back pocket, like it's not funny. Even there, it's established that it's card counting is not cheating. It's simply using a strategy. If the casino chooses to deal a blackjack game from 6 decks of cards and not shuffle after every hand, which they wouldn't because it would be monotonous. If they choose to deal that way, you have every right to use that information they freely give you. But basically, it boils down to is a business required to do business with someone who's unprofitable for them? And that's the way I would see it.
Oh, that's interesting to think of it that way.
Well, if you're
unprofitable for us, so we're kicking you out.
Well, yeah, every contractor out there has had to fire a client once. It's like, I can't do work for you. You're just a net drain on my life. And so that's firing. The idea of firing a customer isn't anathema to me by any means. And and that's all they're doing. And it's a lot better. It's. They're a lot better about it than they used to be. Perhaps in the mob days, you might be expected to be taken on a guided tour of the Mojave with half a glass of water. Now, just somebody in a suit comes, say, "Oh, hey, so and so, very nice here. You play any game on the house? Here's my card if you have any questions." And if you show up again, you're going to get trespassed. That's not spoken, but it's implied.
Interesting. All right, so let's get to. So we did a little bit of the math, and I think it's going to infuse a lot of what we say going forward. And you do have an interesting background. You're the first person I've met who is doing the job that you're doing, right? So, now, are men in Western societies mistreated?
In some ways, yes. In a non-zero and non-trivial number of ways, I would say they are.
Okay. Like in how? What kind of way?
Um, Particularly, I guess my friend said it best, is that the single biggest issue men face is convincing people that men face any issues at all.
Yeah, I
Um,
agree with that
it,
actually. Hmm.
it invariably, if you mention that men are the majority of victims of violence, including the most common types of assault and the worst type of violence, murder, invariably the response you can expect is, well, they commit most of the crimes. Well, yes, they do. And that's another issue altogether. But if that, it seems to cloud people's minds in thinking of, to even thinking men have that as an issue. Our government in Canada, for the longest time, in Indigenous communities have been petitioning the government to finally do something about the epidemic of missing and murdered in Indigenous girls and women, which is absolutely a vital issue. And our current Prime Minister has at least paid lip service to it. Not
Hmm.
enough for my taste, but it's something. But in this, you now have people in Indigenous communities correctly pointing out, well, missing and murdered men in our communities are three times more numerous, and we're not even giving them lip service. We're almost, yeah, it's almost like we're blaming them for their lot, and that doesn't seem right. Um,
That's it. That's it.
yeah,
That's it. That's sort of how I think about it. So, um, one example that I can give from the U.S. is if you're a homeless, well, it's just hard if you're homeless to find a home, right? But your chances of getting a place to stay temporarily in a homeless shelter are greatly increased if you are a woman or if you're a child.
yep,
It's very difficult for men to find a place to stay. Like you'll have women's only shelters in a lot of large cities. You're not going to have that for men. And of course, everyone's going to try and take care of children, so they'll find a place for the
of
child.
course.
And it's these sort of little things. Or if you tell someone that men are sentenced to or have a harsher sentences for the same crime compared to women, they it just kind of goes over their head. They can't
Yeah.
they can't compute that this is something
Well, yeah.
that you'd want to talk about.
Well, and especially with the sentence disparity. Dr. Sonia Starr, 2010, did studies looking at disparity in federal cases, looking for racial biases. I'm sure it's completely understood. Yes, white, all other things. Again, this is all other things being equal,
That's right.
controlling
All the
for
things being
all
equal.
other variables. That if you are white, you are less likely to be incarcerated. When you are incarcerated for the same time for a slightly longer sentence. And she studied the gender gap as well and found that the gap was 6 times larger. And it's almost kind of hard for me to grapple even saying that, to
Six
imagine
times
that
larger
6 times
than
larger.
the racial gap.
Yeah. to
Okay.
to imagine that, and we all know how racist that is. I'm trying to imagine a 6 times heavier empirical numerical bias, and yeah, that's hard for me to wrap my
Yeah,
brains
yeah,
around.
that's a big difference.
Yeah.
So
And
just to be clear, so if we find, for example, and also for those who might see this later, if we find that black men are sentenced to 2 years more in prison for a particular crime than white men, if we compare those men and women, then it's what, 12 more years or something? Is that what you're saying?
for
Something like that?
the gap goes from almost 10% to almost 50%. All other things being equal, when sentenced for the same crime under the same circumstances.
Okay.
And
Wow.
about
Wow.
and only two-thirds, only two-thirds as likely, women are only two-thirds as likely as men to even be incarcerated in the first place. And this is, when I know I may sound like I'm woe are the men when I say that people don't look at men's issues, but look at someone like Hillary Clinton. When she campaigned, she correctly pointed to, among one of her points, correctly pointed to this bias, pro-white, anti-person of color bias.
Mhm.
She correctly pointed to it as a problem. She didn't quote Dr. Starr's study, but the way she worded the results, I'm almost certain that's what she was referring to. Yet when it came to the gender issue, she wrote an article, an editorial in USA Today, calling for more leniency for women prisoners. And that's, I see that all the time. In 2010 in the UK, and this is from a BBC link. I can share this, so I'm not. This isn't like some. This is the BBC. They had mentioned that a task force commissioned by the UK government concluded that no woman should be sent to prison for any crime ever. Close all the women's prisons, community rehab, everything. No jail for women, and that's. I would call that a case of strengthening a bias that's already there, to put it mildly.
I think that so the standard response would be to call on context, historical context, and we do this with racial issues too. We say, well, all right, now men have dominated society for this long time, and whereas women have been dealing with all these discrimination and bias, so we have to look at things in a different way. You can't compare them, and so that's kind of the standard response. And I don't think in this situation, at least with disparities, that should be an issue. The historical context. It's just not. It might be an issue when it comes to maybe something with work or like promoting women in fields that they normally haven't been in. I get that and support that actually, but not with the sentencing disparities.
Well, especially when you look at something like the criminal justice system, it's inherent on the idea of treating people equally, right? Like it's a key component. And I understand what you're talking about looking at historical context, and you can't look at things in numbers. And I freely admit that the way I look at the world, this could be one of my blind spots, which is part of the reason why it's important to have a good group of friends and people who are going to provide insight and context and other things you can miss. Like taking an example, when we're talking about the gender disparity, I have a number of very good friends that I talk to who are feminists, self-described card-carrying feminists. Quick shout out to Sarah Grinfus and Claudia Brown and Carolyn Harbour, some of the ones I've talked to over the years about a lot of stuff. And when I would talk to them, they would be the first to point out, yes, there's a sentencing disparity, but part of it is because we're infantilizing women, especially when it comes to sex crimes and women who commit sex crimes. And we'll put that out there later, I'm sure. But yeah, a big part of that disparity is because, we have a view that sex is for men to have, to be given to by women, which is just a maddening double standard. It infuriates me. But yeah, part of it could be that when you're giving light or non-existent standards to female rapists, like literally 0 days in jail, yes, part of it is infantilizing it. Part of it is because women have always been seen as, well, that guy should be lucky, right? So
that's true. That's true. I read something in the past, I don't know, a year or so about, or maybe it was longer than that, about the Victorian era in Britain and how they really locked in this idea that men are naturally sexual beasts, and women's job is to, I mean, as you can say, maybe reward a man with their sex if the man does something well, or prevent that person. Like their job is to be the person, the sex that sort of suppresses sexual activity or something like that. And so that has carried over to all of the former English colonies. And so America and Canada would be like that, have that kind of double standard. Look, I want to, so since we're on this path, I'll go to your tweet, and eventually we'll get back to Kathy's thing, because we just went off in a different direction, which is cool. So let's go ahead and talk about those double standards. And I'm going to put up a tweet that you tweeted a couple of days ago. Maybe it's a little bit longer now, but you tweeted it, and I didn't quite understand what you were getting at. So let me see here. I think this is it. All right.
My apologies for the earthy language, viewers.
So the comment section's got me twitching like Homelander. I've never seen that, so that's one thing that threw me off. But after that, that's not important. Nuclear grade double standards, starting with the headline and ending with me remembering we put R. Kelly up the river for the rest of his natural life. What's going on here?
Okay. Well, what we have here is we have a famous, fabulously wealthy, rich woman who was charged with having sex with a 14-year-old boy 4 times in one day.
Mm-hmm.
And when we
Yep.
talk about the double standards, like I said, start right at the headline. Um, the way they worded it,
Glamorous heiress.
there
Yeah.
it is. Having sex with. No, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure the word is rape, right? Is you can
Yeah.
qualify.
Yeah. And I.
You could qualify as statutory if you wanted. You could say charged with statutorily raping. Maybe that makes a
Yeah.
difference if you're talking about a legal case. That's fine. Um,
Uh-huh.
and the other
Which is
thing
what
is in the
someone did. They changed the
yeah,
headline here. You see that? Yeah.
yeah. And the other thing about the article, the way it's written, because
Mm-hmm.
she was involved in horse breeding, and so the article is filled with jokey horse puns. Not about like breeding and you know neigh versus neigh, neigh, and it's just written in the most flippant
I didn't
style.
read the article.
I mean, it's the New York Post. You know what? I can't fault them for being who they are, and that is clearly who they are, right? I'm sure their readers would expect nothing less. Um, but then you think about that and how they treated that, and like I know how we've treated that. People look at the case of R. Kelly, and if you scroll down to the picture, as somebody said, here you have in the New York Post article, you have that fabulous. Imagine if, in covering the R. Kelly case, they posted that picture,
Yeah.
up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
that would. I have it on good advice from a number of my friends that this is a very. It would be a very provocative picture to put, but
Yes.
here she is.
Yes.
But here she is in a bikini and cut off shorts, looking all glamorous herself. And
Hmm.
from the sentencing, I haven't seen what the sentence is. I'm gonna guess it's pretty low. I'm gonna guess it's not the 30 years that R. Kelly. 30 years he
No.
got, right?
Yeah. And it's probably going to be more. There's another
Yeah,
case another trial coming up, I believe. So,
yeah,
yeah, he's in for life, at least 30
yeah.
years.
Yeah. I doubt he's getting out, but just how they see it's another parallel. Everyone remembers the Brock Turner case. Horribly light sentence. 6 months reduced to 3 months. Um, Horribly light, and of course, it rightly generated a lot of outrage with people. I think people got so mad that they didn't appreciate that the reason the judge gave the light sentence is because the laws in California required him to. Like, I can't believe, why is he saying he's concerned about the impact of the sentence on the convicted, because the laws required him to, right?
Okay.
Why
Now,
did
you
he?
said Brock Turner. Let's just be clear. So, Brock Turner was the Stanford sexual assault case. He was a swimmer who raped a woman who was drunk or something like that. Is that the
Yes,
same one?
that
Okay.
is what I was thinking of. It wasn't a case of both parties were comparably buzzed, both tried to do sex such as it was, but we're going to call the man the rapist. That's happened before. This is not that case. This is She was like unconscious, right? It was
Uh-huh.
as
Yep.
clear
Yep.
as
Yep.
clear. And that was another thing. Part of it, why did they call it sexual assault and not rape? Because that's the way the laws were. As a result of the case, they quickly patched a error. I wouldn't even call it a loophole. That kind of makes it sound too glib. They patched an error in the laws that said it couldn't be counted as rape if the other party was not actively resisting. Well, that's a case of a very old law with a very backwards way of thinking finally being brought closer to modern times. But while this case was going on, um, there's one, Misty Fitzwater, Jefferson City, Missouri, guilty to several counts of raping a minor, providing marijuana to a minor, 0 days in jail. And she was a single mother. And the judge says, don't worry, this won't affect your custody of the kids either. So 0 days in jail, no repercussions with the custody. And as light as 3 months is, this is still 100% less jail time, right? Like, And
So wait,
not
okay, I get
yeah,
the double. I
yeah,
see you're pointing out the double standard.
yeah,
You're building a strong case for that. But
yeah.
just let me ask you. So, do you think that the sentences should be the male sentence should be reduced, or the female sentence
Oh
should
no,
be
no,
heavier?
Brock Turner should have gotten a lot more jail time, and this woman should have gotten some incarceration as well.
I see. Okay, okay,
There's
yeah, yeah.
there's
Look,
no, yeah, just to be clear, no. Thank you for giving me a chance to not have that taken out of context. In no way am I pro Brock Turner at all.
of
No,
course not. Of
that's
course not. So let me tell you something now about these kind of cases. So I grew up in the American South, and I came of age in the late '80s, early '90s. And I can tell you, if I was a 14-year-old young man, I guess, um, I would have at that time been actively seeking sex. And if a woman would have decided, hey, okay, you know what, I like you enough, let's do this, I would not have seen it as sexual assault. And I mean, I'm glad things have changed a lot, because yes, that is, you're a kid, an adult is really taking advantage of you. But I think that that idea is still infused in our minds, that okay, this isn't really rape because the guy wants it anyway, and
oh, obviously, because all
yeah.
men want sex, all men always want sex, et cetera, right? Yeah, no, that's I can believe it. I was 14 years old once. Days of yore, it seems like, but I was once 14, and yeah, though a bit of a late bloomer, I remember, being a young boy who
You
very
want
much
sex at that age. You
was a
want you
kid.
want to have sex.
Yeah,
So
you also
yeah.
want to stay up all night and eat Mountain Dew and drink, drink Mountain Dew and
Uh-huh.
eat 3 bags of Doritos. You also want to do 10,000 other stupid things that seem like a good idea at the time because you're 15. And I would even point out that these, underage girls also have similar drives, right? We don't
Hmm.
imagine that the girl that R. Kelly raped, may also have had that same, oh my God, I would love to have sex with a very rich and famous person. You know, um,
Huh.
they have that mindset. It's the job as adults, of course,
You're
to
right. They did. They
yeah,
did want, and but yes, it's a job of the adults to be
yeah.
the adult in the room, right, and not allow that to happen. But you're right. Of course, we don't think about the fact that, because it's icky. No one wants to think about it that way. That yes, the if you, I mean, 14, 15-year-old girls want to have sex too, and if there's a famous man that wants to have sex with them, they in their 14, 15-year-old mind may think it's a good
Yeah,
idea, and it's up to us as adults to say no, it's not.
right.
But you're right. You're right about that. Yeah.
And it even it, it even comes down when you talk about these double standards in rape cases, to where even judges can go on record admitting, yeah, if the genders were reversed, there'd be jail. Mark Curris, in the case of Cameo Patch, substitute teacher, that's a whole separate subset of these kind of cases, or when they involve a teacher. Same thing. Judge goes on record and says, "Yeah, if the genders were reversed, I'd have been inclined to order incarceration."
Hmm.
And while there are certainly judges, I have no doubt, in America that harbor similar racial biases, okay, I can't imagine what would happen if a judge says, "Yeah, well, if the victim was white and the perpetrator was, I didn't quarter." Man, you thought Persky had it rough. They would have kicked that judge down the hole like in
That's right.
300.
That's right. He
Like
would
it would
really
have
be
been,
canceled. That would
yeah.
be, yeah. So let me, before we leave this subject, let me just kind of give my whole take on this. Frequently, well, it doesn't quite fit with the double standards, but it's more about how we don't necessarily think about men as being mistreated. So in a way, I'm going back, but I didn't get to say it before. Sometimes on Twitter, I'll post things like this, and the response is always like something patriarchy, such that it's the men actually who's causing the problem.
Okay.
Right. So in
So
fact, we're going to this would be a nice time for me to bring up Kathy's 2-minute
yeah,
talk, and we can kind of talk about it. But okay, what Kathy's going to do is point out some trends about men not getting work and how there are fewer jobs that were, I think she called it male coded. And so that's a problem. That's a sympathetic way of thinking about it. But what happens with my progressive mutuals is they will say, well, the problem is actually the men themselves. They've built this world of patriarchy, and so now they can't find jobs that they have had for so long, and it's their fault. And I'll say, well, look, you got to think about depression, and it's, oh, well, it's their fault. They got to go to the therapist, and they're men and they don't want to go to a therapist, so they got to change, patriarchy again, or in this case, toxic masculinity. There
Yeah.
isn't like a language that allows us to talk about men in a sympathetic way,
Yeah.
right? And
Or
I think that's a
certainly,
problem.
or certainly at least in terms of being hurt by uh, I wouldn't even call it sexist biases, because I know when a lot of people when they use sexism, they have the concept of of institutional baked right in, and they would not want to use that word, where you can't be sexist towards men. So even, yeah, just saying strictly, we're talking about men on the wrong side of an empirical bias, or being the majority of people that are in a hurt in a bad way. 95% of workplace fatalities, vast majority of murder victims or assault victims, vast majority of deaths by suicide. But you even try and consider, yes, I acknowledge the glass ceiling. I'm trying to tell you, the same machinations have a glass cellar as well. And a lot of
Oh,
people
interesting.
just
A glass cellar.
glass cellar, right?
I've never
They
heard
will
that
not.
before, Joe.
Well, they can't even see the machinations. They see, um, they will express things like homelessness. They talk about it as a women's issue. 1 in 4 women are homeless. That sounds like saying 3 out of 4 homeless people are men. Pardon me, not 1 in 4 women are homeless. 1 in 4 homeless are women,
Women.
which which sounds like, again, saying 3 out of 4 homeless are men, just in a roundabout way. Um, but
Interesting.
that,
And I never thought about it, but yes. If
yeah,
why are we not talking about the 75% of the homeless population being male?
the
Interesting.
UN Women's Twitter account ran a very long, fretful thread about the plight of women reporters around the world, and they solemnly noted that 1 out of every 6 reporters killed on the job are women. I'm like, I don't think you need to have a heavy math background to then conclude what the other 5 out of 6 are, right?
Okay, but wait,
But
wait,
yeah,
wait. Just to be
yes.
fair, though, how many journalists are females? Like they need to, they needed to
Oh,
put that
and
in
that's
there.
that's another that's another issue altogether,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yep,
So
that number would go up, of course, if that job were available and open to more women, and
yeah,
more
yeah.
women chose to take it. So
Hmm. All right, let's see what Kathy's talking about here. I kind of like that she uses the term neat, which I like, and so it'd be nice
okay.
to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very complicated, interrelated issue, but
I should stop. So just for those who might watch this later, so she was asked to talk about some of the problems that men are facing, which is kind of what we're talking about here. And so I just started it when she first began giving the explanation, right? So I cut off the question. We don't need the question. Her answer is fine. So let's go.
one of the things that I've really noticed is that the kind of standard of a male breadwinner marriage is becoming less and less feasible over time. So several trends are playing into this. One is women's labor force participation rates and average wages are growing, while men's labor force participation rates are declining and low, and their wages have been stagnant. The bottom 75% of men in terms of income, their wages have been stagnant since the 1970s. And meanwhile, cost disease means that the cost of our biggest expenditures, housing, education, healthcare, things like that, are increasing. And so it's going to be impossible, in other words, in the near future, and already it is impossible for a lot of Americans to have a male breadwinner model of marriage. And so essentially, when you have low and declining labor force participation rates, so that means, for a cohort of American native-born men from roughly like 18 to 30, there's something like 20% of men who are just called NEET, which means not in education, employment, or training. So, how do we get these men into the labor force? And then, how do we make marriage happen? And how do we redefine masculinity in light of these macroeconomic changes? So these are some of the things that I'm kind of grappling with. And then also the knock-on effects of these macroeconomic changes. And then another thing that I think is really playing into this is that demand for male-coded labor is low and declining, and demand for feminine-coded labor is increasing. And all this is just going to make it ever more difficult to maintain the male breadwinner model of marriage. And so, how do we get these men out of their homes, into jobs, into marriages, and into a model of masculinity that is healthy and workable in the new economic reality?
Okay, so I like that. I like that because she's talking about things in ways that are, to me, are somewhat neutral. So you're talking about these macroeconomic changes, which are making it difficult for men to be the men they want to be or used to could be.
And I like the way she talks, especially like male coded and female encoded. That to me, it's like you're acknowledging the stereotype and how it applies without using language to suggest this is the way it should be. It must be.
That's right. That's right.
Not say men's work, women's work. The lowering of male encoded labor and the rise of female encoded labor makes me think of one of the many things that also gets me rolling my eyes. And it was related to that New York Post article, is that the same people that would say, "Oh, that guy was so lucky," and then they say things like, "I don't want male teachers. I don't want male men working as daycare workers. That's creepy." The women that are actually predators are like, "Yeah, high five," and the men that just want to be predators like, "Okay, groomer, get away from my kids." And
so you've seen this people
Oh,
saying that they don't want men doing female coded labor.
yeah, well, especially around children. I would say that these people that talk like that are not ones I agree with on a lot of things, especially gender mechanics. But yeah, somebody put together an entire history just around that New York Post article, and it got the person's response to that tweet, which was always like, "Yay, way to go, kid," and then accusing teachers of being groomers, or so we don't, or male men who want to be in daycare or teaching, big red flags and stuff like that. And if the transition you're talking about with Kathy in Kathy's clip is happening, you're going to need men in those positions. You're going to need whenever people talk about women being historically underrepresented in some areas and taking measures to rectify that, like you talked about, that's fine. There are fields that men would benefit from that too. The education is definitely one of them. And it's kind of boggling that the same people who lament at great length the death of masculinity then berate any men who want to get in a position to be pedagogues and to teach and be role models for the next generation of boys and girls who would benefit from positive male role models in a nurturing or educational space.
You know what? So I am brutally honest with myself, and I, as is well known, I guess at this point, and I'll talk about how I really think about things. So I'm going to be honest. I do find it a little odd if I see a man, if I would see a man as a nanny. I would, or just working with young kids. I'm not, obviously I wouldn't say, hey, you shouldn't be doing this, but I'm just talking on the inside. I'll be like, oh, this is weird, and maybe my views about these things, male coded and female coded, needs to change, because I mean, Kathy's right. Any economist or labor economist or even a sociologist would tell you that those jobs that men have traditionally been doing are going away, and they're going to have to move into these social service, human service jobs that have been traditionally linked with females. And people like me got to change and be like, hey, go into that, be a nurse, man. It's cool, you know what I'm saying? You're saving lives. That's good, right? You know, so.
So sometimes even if we're going to play the stereotype, sometimes even just quiet strength can be the most compassionate and humane thing that a person who needs a medical professional could have. Like men can, even if we're acknowledging these older stereotypes of male behavior, there's still ways for men in these industries to be stereotypically male and still do these jobs and do them well.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, yeah. There's the job and there's how you do the job.
Yeah.
You know what, Charles?
Mm.
I've been thinking about. So I'm on the left, and I'm always trying to come up with ways to get more people to vote Democrat. And one thing I've been thinking about is how Democrats can attract men, because we don't do that well with guys, especially white males. But it seems to me that also males of color are shifting more conservative. But I think one thing could be to that the left can do is identify. Look, there's a problem here with these men's issues, or with men in employment. We got too many NEETs out there, not in education, employment, or training.
That's a
Right?
great term.
It is. It is. It's really good. Because basically you don't have to say they're losers. You don't have to use that kind of negative language. You can just say NEETs, which is neat. The word neat is a neat word. In any case, so you could say, if I was a Democratic politician on the left, I could say, look, we're having trouble with NEETs here, but we have a way, given our understanding of gender fluidity and how things change, because the conservatives don't do that,
No.
Yeah.
It's baked right into their name. They don't like things changing.
That's right. So we can say, look, you can be a man, a strong, silent type, and still do this job in as a primary school teacher. And I'm gonna fund this with a diversity program because we need more role models, more male role models, this kind of thing.
One thing Canada has that the U.S. doesn't, in our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, when we talk about equality, equal treatment, equal rights and access, there's a specific clause put in saying that this doesn't apply to measures that are designed to correct historical inequities or to ameliorate marginalized groups. Like we put the exceptions in there, and at least in theory, it certainly wouldn't happen under our current prime minister. But at least in theory, this could apply in Canada to, we can get more, just as surely as we can get more women in the RCMP, we can get more men in classrooms, right? Mm-hmm. We can put on hiring drives to get men in as nurses and as teachers and in those social services, in those female-coded jobs, right? And I think you're going to have to see a transition in that work. And I think that definitely, like you said, you can still be the manly man, if you want, and still do the job well.
Yeah.
I've always maintained that it's not about forcing change, but simply saying you don't have to adhere to this stereotype. It's about choice, Be free to who you want to be, man.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. All right. How can Charles Mousseau change the world?
Well, as my names would say, I'll make the world a better place in my funeral. But other than that, I think one thing I hope, because of the way I look at things, I would like to think that I have the potential to be a proof of concept in how to, for instance, I'm sure you know how the whole anti-woke grifter industry is off and running. I would like to think that I have in my Twitter post, as I call it, policing the edge cases, right? Like there are cases where good ideas go too far, becoming the good intentions paving the roads to hell. We need to be able to criticize that in a way that isn't just completely retrograde, isn't just slamming everything woke. I think similar. Most of all, I'd like to think I could be a proof of concept of how to advocate for men's issues while avoiding the trap of falling into the manosphere,
Alpha male.
pickup artists, men going their own ways, who use gender advocacy as the tiniest, patina of respectability for what is essentially their deep-seated gendered hatred. And to be fair, there are the feminists I talk to. They understand that there are some, probably a smaller proportion, but there are those among women and their allies who are just those, internet trolls, living in a cavern, in a canyon, in an excavated mine, signing their books literally, dear so-and-so, did you remember to kill a man today? They're using, again, legitimate advocacy as a patina to cover who they really are. And I would like to think that if I could change the world, I could at least be a proof of concept of how you can advocate for men's issues in a way that you don't have to be. I'm an anti-feminist. 30 years ago, Charles would have said, I'm an anti-feminist. 30 years ago, I also would have had my 3 Rush Limbaugh books, and I would have had the old frosted blonde hair and jet black monobrow going on. So in many ways, I'd like to think I've changed in 30 years. For the
Wait a minute. Wait. What? Is there something I should know about frosted blonde hair and jet black?
It was monobrow. It was the style. Men, especially rockers, you'd see that they would have just blonde hair, but they'd keep the thick eyebrows and the full beard, all like jet black. It was a style. Okay, I'll say that much. But I would like to think that, touching back on how we discussed issues of gender double standards, the people I talk to, what I consider feminist allies, and that's really what they are. We want the same thing. We have the same fundamental principles, and we disagree slightly on the best way to get there, right? And I think that there needs to be advocacy for men's issues that's like that. And I know I'm not going to be the best person to do it. I have a massive character flaw in that I do not suffer fools well. And this is unfortunate since we are living in the time of the biggest fools imaginable. So I'm not the right man for the job to be that, but as a proof of concept, I'd like to think that, if I can argue for issues that affect men, I can be the person instead of every day is International Men's Day, or LOL wins, every International Women's Day, you get the trolls that will say, when's International Men's Day? It's sad that that's the only time in the year people look it up when they want to be, trolls. I'd like to think I could be a person that say, yeah, it's November 19th, and we're going to talk about these issues. Maybe spend some time talking with your friends and raise awareness about them. That's it. If I can do that, I would say I'm a net positive on the discourse, which is all I ultimately want to be. Even
well, you know what?
When I fail.
I hope that happens, and I hope. Some people really want a lot of Twitter followers. I don't really care so much about that, but I think some people need a lot of Twitter followers if they are doing things that are good. Because you could get your ideas out there. And so I'm saying that you need more Twitter followers.
Maybe I do. Half my feed is irreverent pop culture, as you saw with the Homelander reference. And just to explain briefly, without getting into too much, the character Homelander is basically psychotic, right? And Anthony Starr, who plays him, whenever you can tell he's unhinged or upset, he just gets overrun by facial tics, and he does it so well that you, even without saying a word, just from what he's doing in his face, you can see the rage brewing inside him. But yeah, I think there might be too many pop culture references. There's a lot of poker, a lot of chess, a lot of gambling talk. But on the other hand, that can interact. I know when it
Oh,
comes to
sure.
politics, when it comes to politics, I trust betting markets more than I trust any poll. The idea being that opinion polls are people voicing their opinion, and betting markets are people voicing their opinion and also putting their money where their mouth is and spending their lives trying to do it smartly so as to make money off people doing it dumbly and doing it poorly, let's say. And it's there's there's a lot of fluff on my feed, but I appreciate the shout out, and I do talk a lot about issues that impact men from a male centric point of view, with a view on how we can correct these biases and provide help for victims of such biases.
All right, Charles, this has been fun, man. I really appreciate it.
It is. We have to do this again sometime.
Oh, sure. There's always repeat guests. I always try to get the guests the first time and then have them come back again, like in a year or so, or something like that. So I really appreciate it.
Hey, no, I appreciate you taking the time. Believe me, the honor is mine.